All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining today's TCC Round 5 Pre-Application for Planning Grant Workshop. It is great to see all of you and seeing this interest in this program and particularly for this planning workshop. So to start us off, we'll go over some housekeeping items. So next slide, please. So these are some few housekeeping items that we want to review before we get started with content today. So this presentation will be recorded for educational purposes. We ask that you are all mindful of your audio and to be mute, or we'll be muting you if we hear any background noise. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, feel free to at any point either raise your hand or use the chat box function. We will also have a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. So if you happen to have other questions towards the end, we are happy to answer those as well. The use of camera is optional, but we encourage for you to have your camera on when speaking, just so we can kind of get to see your face and get to know each other. Again, just a friendly reminder to make sure you are muted when you're not speaking and to unmute yourself when you are speaking. If you happen to have any technical difficulties during the presentation, feel free to reach out to myself, Anna at estolanoadvisors.com. And following this presentation, we will have the recording and a few other resource handouts that will be available a few days after the session. So please expect a follow-up email from us with that information. And next slide. So we will go over the agenda. So for today's agenda, we will go over an overview of the application, specifically for the planning grant application. That will then follow up with a planning area map tutorial to go over how to define your planning area, followed by next steps, which will include going over some technical assistance services and steps, as well as the timeline for this round 5 application period. Then we will have some breakout rooms where we can further discuss a little bit more some of the application components and or any questions depending on applicant type. And at the end, we will host a couple minutes with ourselves, including SGC staff, to go over any questions and answers you may still have. Next slide. So today we have a few learning objectives. So some of the learning objectives for this workshop is one, to learn more about the TCC planning grant and what the planning grant entails. We will review the planning grant components and the application process, what goes into the application, what you can expect. And then with that, we will also learn how to use Google Mind Maps so that you all can start planning your area for the planning area and getting those maps ready as we gear up for the application. At the end, we'll discuss your planning grant application with SGC and the technical assistance providers and other potential applicants with these breakout rooms and the Q&A discussion session at the end. Next slide. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So before we dive into our agenda items today, we would like to ask all attendees if you can please introduce yourselves in the chat. Feel free to state your name, your organization, and maybe one thing you hope to get out of the session. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Ana Cuevas Flores, and I am an associate with Estolano Advisors. And if we can go to the next slide. So just to give you a sense of our role on the team, Estolano Advisors is the lead coordinator of the TCC Technical Assistance Team and part of the Technical Assistance Lead Team, which includes Arab and CivicWell. Collectively, we are a third-party team of consultants, organizations, and firms that provide technical assistance for the TCC program. And we have been involved with the TCC program since round 1 and are happy to continue through this next round. But as you can see here on this chart, we do not do this alone. Estolano, as well as Arab and CivicWell, consist of the larger TA lead team. And on the broader technical assistance team, we have a group of more specialized technical assistance provider, including Enterprise, CDRG, California Coalition for Rural Housing, National Indian Justice Center, California Relief and Fair Law Strategies, all with specialized assistance within housing, tribal organizations, urban housing, and climate adaptation and resilience. So today you will get to hear from us as Estelano advisors and CivicWell. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Riley, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you all for joining today. It's really great to see so much interest in round 5 of this program. If we move on to the next slide, we can highlight the 2 organizations presenting today, and those are CivicWell as well as Estelano Advisors. I am with Estelano Advisors. You may have met me before from round 4 or from other statewide efforts, but my name is Riley O'Brien. I'm a senior analyst with Estelano and kind of the lead project manager for the technical assistance team for TCC. We are also joined by our colleagues at CivicWell, who have also done a lot of work with round 4 planning grant applicants and plan to do the same in round 5. So I will pass it over to Kayla from CivicWell.
Hi, everyone. Great to see some names and organizations that you represent coming in on the chat. My name is Kayla McDonald-Encina. You may have seen me from round 4. I, as well as the rest of the CivicWell team, have worked on this program since the very beginning as well. Got a great partnership with EA. And I'm a senior project manager with my organization and looking forward to working with you this next round.
Great, thank you, Kayla. And I also want to give chance Nan on our team from Estelano Advisors to introduce himself.
Thanks, Anna. Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Nani, associate with Estelano Advisors. And yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Anna.
Thank you. And if we can go to the next slide. I know we have some SGC staff on the call, so I want to hand it over to SGC staff to quickly introduce SGC and the staff on this call.
Hi, my name is Anna Jane Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a program analyst with TCC. We have Jess also on the line, so I'll pass to her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess. I am a program associate. I handle technical assistance and communications and outreach work for TCC. So nice to meet you all. And Rebecca is not on the call right now, but she will be later on. And she is a program analyst for TCC.
Great, thank you. And I see folks introducing themselves in the chat. Feel free to continue to introduce yourselves as we go on. You know, just stating your name, your organization, and maybe one thing that you hope to get out of this session. Okay, so with that, we'll continue moving on to the next slide. So since the inception of the TCC program, there have been up to date right now 4 rounds of planning grants awarded, and you can see these past awards here on this map. In the most recent rounds, which was round 4, there was 7 applicants that were awarded grants, but the number of awards varies depending on the funding available. As seen throughout the rounds, there's different amounts of funding, as well as different amount of grantees each round. So next slide. So as we look ahead to this upcoming round of round 5, as you may know, the round 5 guidelines have not been finalized and the final funding amounts have not been confirmed either. So this slide presents estimates for round 5 and what maybe we can expect. So roughly there will be about $1 million total available for funding for round 5 planning grants, which will likely be granted to about 3 to 5 grantees, depending on the confirmed funding amount. And again, just to reiterate, the final funding amount will be released when the application is released. Next slide. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kayla, who will go over some application overview.
Thank you, Anna. Again, Kayla McDonald-Zena with CivicWell. I'll be going through the application overview and timeline piece. And not that you're looking directly at my face anyways, but I'm going to turn off my video as sometimes I have bandwidth issues and I'd rather convey the information. Next slide. Okay, so this is obviously all these slides are very important, but this is certainly kind of the foundation that tells you whether or not you could lead one of these proposals. So we have a list here of eligible lead applicant types. It's pretty expansive. There are a few caveats listed here that I'll go over, but generally community-based organizations, local, nonprofit, joint powers authorities, Council of Governments, California Native American tribes, as well as other forums of those same types of organizations are all eligible to lead the entire application. One note that you'll see on the left side is that a public agency, there must be at least one public agency that is a co-applicant. And tribal governments, departments and tribally designated housing authorities or utility districts do qualify as a public agency. And also non-recognized tribes that are tribally chartered or 501(c)(3) are eligible applicants. Next slide. In terms of the planning application components, there are a few different components that are just provided as an overview here. So there are eligibility and threshold documents. There are a number of documents that are detailed in the guidelines, including planning area maps. And certainly if we provide technical assistance, we can provide you with a bit more information to help you understand what's required in terms of the documentation. Then there are narrative workbooks, there's a work plan, a budget, and lastly, letters of support. Next slide. So the next two slides talk about eligibility and threshold requirements. This particular slide is in regards to incorporated areas and tribal territories. So project areas must be contiguous, although there is no maximum area. They could be pretty big. At least 51% of the total project area must be within disadvantaged census tracts. So that's top 25% of CalEnviroScreen. That could be either 3 or 4.0, or top 5% of pollution burden indicator if the total score is unavailable. Alternatively, 51% of the project area can be within federally recognized tribal territory. The remaining 49% of your project or planning area could either meet the criteria that was identified above, the 51% criteria that I just went over, or it could be in a low income community, which we look at the AB 1550 requirements when determining if that meets that criteria. And there are kind of a number of criteria eligible under AB 1550, further defined in the guidelines. Next slide. Now for unincorporated communities, the project area requirements are a little bit different. Again, same as before, the project area must be contiguous, but there is no maximum area size. 51% of the planning area must meet one of the following criteria, which is verified disadvantaged unincorporated status through local agency formation committee or LAFCO. And it has to meet the CalEnviroScreen top 25%. Eligible location per the TCC mapping tool. It could be a self-identified disadvantaged community with using localized data, or it could be within a previous TCC planning grant area that was already awarded. The remaining 49% or less must meet the criteria above again, or be within a low-income community as per AB 1550. Next slide. So the narrative sections here, this just gives a little bit of information about what generally the narrative component contains. So you'd have to talk a little bit about your planning area needs, overview of your planning area, really tell us the story of why the planning area was chosen, give a narrative overview, maybe some data. You could talk about the priority populations that are served and how the planning area meets the disadvantaged community criteria. You also should talk about what you're proposing to do. So description of the tasks, your planning activities, and just really a detailed description of how you're going to meet the activities, how you're going to fulfill them. And again, you want to make sure that they also align with TCC objectives. You want to talk about organizational capacity. So that includes a summary of your partnership structure, roles of co-applicants, and applicants' involvement in the planning activities. And then lastly, you can select one or more transformative elements and just talk a little bit about them, how your proposed activities outlined in your work plan will advance at least one or more, again, of these TCC transformative elements. So regarding the transformative elements, again, one or more that you do choose, you do want to talk about community engagement, you could talk about one or more of these elements that are listed on this page. So that could be community engagement, displacement avoidance, workforce development, economic opportunities, climate adaptation, resilience, or leverage funding. And this is an example here. Again, I believe we do give some examples. You can always request them of work plans from past grant recipients. That is publicly available information. You can always request that from us. But again, here on this slide, you could kind of see what it looks like. You do want to have a pretty clear task and then a series of subtasks and what you see there in white under the blue headers to achieve that task. So planning grants are for a 2-year term, and they should be detailed enough for us to understand, or for, SGC to understand what you're doing and the steps that you're going to take in order to fulfill that work plan. Next slide. Here's an example of a budget. It does include project costs, all eligible costs, pretty itemized. Another really great thing about the budget that's helpful is there are a number of calculators in here for you to make sure that you meet the different requirements of the program. There is an indirect cost rate cap, I believe. There are other caps and other kind of requirements that you just have to make sure that you fall within those requirements. And again, the budget template that we do give you, or that's part of the application materials, helps you navigate all that as well. Next slide. So there are a variety of letters and materials that you'll have to collect and submit as a part of your application. So the letters of intent are from the lead applicant and all co-applicants. There's also a formal commitment from a public agency. So that's formal resolution if the public agency is a lead applicant, or a letter of commitment if the public agency is a co-applicant. Again, as we covered before, there must be at least one public agency that is a co-applicant, although a public agency does not have to be a lead applicant. Also, local planning consistency letters from the jurisdiction's planning and public works department or equivalent. And if necessary, a site control letter of commitment from other owners of any property identified for planning activities. Next slide, please. Scoring criteria is pretty straightforward. Objectives and vision, 30 points. Transformative elements and project identification, 50 points. And applicant team capacity, 20 points for a total of 100 points. Under objectives and vision, here are some things to consider in order to score the full points. So comprehensive description of the planning area, clear understanding of community needs and desired outcomes for priority populations, and consistency with statewide planning priorities. Transformative elements and project identification, consider planning activities that advance state and community goals, and connection to at least one TCC transformative element. Applicant team capacity, you want to discuss readiness to connect work on time and within budget, and also the strength and diversity of your partnerships. Here's a little bit of an overview of the application timeline for the current round, which is round 5. So currently February through March, direct application, technical assistance, and onboarding for tribal and unincorporated communities is taking place. And then in February, we'll have the final guidelines adopted by the Strategic Growth Council, as Anna mentioned earlier. Currently, the guidelines are in draft form. In March, there will be an application and notice of funding availability posted, officially announcing that the round 5 has kicked off. April and June, round 5 planning grant interest survey is due. I believe that's when you would first submit your request to receive assistance. Or it could mean, Riley, would you mind clarifying that? Is that to receive assistance, or is that to just qualify to apply for a planning grant?
Sorry, trying to find the mute button there, but it really does vary based on applicant type. So one thing that we'll mention a bit later is, but worth mentioning now as well, technical assistance for planning grant applicants is only available for unincorporated and tribal communities. And so if you are with an unincorporated or tribal community, we will let you know how to request that assistance as early as today. And I know some of you have already requested that assistance. And in that case, we can bring you into the process earlier. But for other planning grant applicants, there is a deadline for just indicating your interest in the planning grant. I know last round, that was in May. I don't believe that SGC has finalized that date, but it will be sometime in the middle of the application period. So essentially, they'd like you to decide whether or not you will apply for a planning grant with at least a month or 2 in advance of the ultimate deadline.
Thank you for jumping on that, Riley. I'm sorry if I put you under the bus a little bit there. And then July through August will be, again, the date is not yet announced, but that is when the round 5 applications will be due. And then in fall, I believe last year in October, so maybe expect October or later this year, round 5 TCC awards will be announced and adopted by the council. And I think this is handed over to Riley, I believe.
That is right. So thank you, Kayla and Anna, for starting off the workshop today. So this portion, what we're going to do is walk through one way that you can start thinking about your planning area, which as you could see in the earlier slides, is one of the potentially more complicated portions of the TCC application. And it is one of the first things that you'll need to deal with to determine whether you're eligible to apply and what communities you would be applying with, and in turn, whether or not you're eligible for technical assistance through our team, the third-party technical assistance provider team. This is optional if you are experienced with using geographic information system software like ArcMap, ArcGIS, that type of stuff. You may just want to go ahead and jump into using those types of software to develop your planning area map. But I think for most of you, and especially for anyone who is from a tribal community or unincorporated community and would like to receive technical assistance, this is a really good place to start, because in this way you can learn, you can kind of scope out your project or your planning area ahead of time, and also essentially bring that to your technical assistance provider, and then we can help finalize that map using some of that GIS software. So most of you probably received an email from me this morning with a PDF attached. I'm going to link to that PDF right now. So that link in the chat that I just put in should open to an online PDF that you can download, you can view in your web browser, but it does describe the steps that we'll be following today to demonstrate how to use Google My Maps. And again, this is just one method. This is really just something developed by Estelano advisors, by the TA team, to kind of help launch this process. But with that, we are hoping that this can kind of help, launch, kind of get those wheels spinning. This is something we can work on together over the next several weeks, several months, as far as developing your planning area. And in that PDF that I linked to, there are actually two important links that are within that PDF. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see one link that is really useful. You unfortunately cannot click on that link through Zoom at the moment, but I can put that one in the chat as well. That is Google My Maps, which is an interactive version of Google Maps that any web browser should be able to access. So that's one link that you'll want to open up if you want to try to follow along today. If you'd rather just kind of sit and watch, that's totally fine. You can go back and watch this recording later. You can review the guide that I linked to, that PDF I linked to, on your own time as well, and try to follow those steps. But there is one more link that I just want to put in the chat to highlight for you all, and it's a link to 3 KMZ files that are essentially a way of starting this process. So I'm going to link to that folder as well, and this is a folder that contains 3 KMZ files. So those are the files that we'll be using in this tutorial today. And I think with that, we can go ahead and launch the tutorial. I know Nan will be walking through the process. I may jump in here and there if necessary, but Nan sort of led this process, so I'll turn it over to him. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can try to answer those. But I'll turn it over to Nan.
Thanks, Riley. Hey, everybody. So as Riley mentioned, please feel free to pull up the mapping guide and follow along. And while I'm pulling up my my website, feel free to log into Google My Maps. Make sure you're also logged into a Google account. Otherwise, the map will not be saved to your account. Give me one sec over here. All right. I hope you all can see my screen. Also, I'll try to go a little bit slow, but please feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast or if you want me to repeat any steps along the way. I'll try to monitor the chat as well. But if you're logged into a Google account and you go to Google My Maps, you can just type in mymaps.google.com or just search for Google My Maps. It should take you to this interface. I already have 2 maps over here. You might just see a blank space. That's okay. That's completely normal. And once you're in this interface, what you want to do next is to click create a new map over here. So click on that. Oops, not sure why that was the case. That should not happen. Hold on.
And just to let everyone know, a Google account is totally free to create. So if that's an option for you, you can do so. I do understand there are some jurisdictions and agencies that block access to Google or even block access to Dropbox. So if that is the case, feel free to reach out to me. We can try to figure out a workaround together. But we may also just need to recommend other software in that case.
All right, there we go. Yes. Okay, so if you click on that, it will take you to this, to a map view of the whole continent. And the first thing you want to do here is to rename your map file. So it's easier for you to keep track of the map and also for you to share with other people. And the way to do that, you want to go over to this little pop window on the top left corner and just click on Untitled Map. So if you click on that, you're going to have another window open. And here you can just add it, just putting a new title. So for this, I'm just going to put in sample map. If you want, you can add a little description just for your own benefits as well, but that's not necessary. Once you're done with that, just go ahead and click on save. And now your new map file is saved with your new name. And okay, so next, you want to zoom into your community or your planning area. And there are a few ways to do that, but the most straightforward way to do that is just to use the search bar over here and type into the planning area or the jurisdiction or any landmark close to your planning area. So for this demonstration, we're going to use Chicken Ranch Rancheria as an example. Since I already done that a couple of times, Google gives me the option to auto-populate that. So I'm just gonna go ahead with that instead of typing. And you might see a few different options popping up. If you're not sure which one is your planning area, just go ahead and click on search. And this is gonna give you a little ping on the map. And you can zoom into that location just to make sure that's the area you want to select. And in this case, we actually want to select this location over here because it matches our planning area a little bit more properly. So if I click on that, this little pop-up window is going to come up again, and you want to go ahead and click on Add to Map. And now you see over here, under your untitled layer, you have your location, the pinpoint for that location over here. And it's also going to have some additional information over here, but you can ignore this. They're probably not going to be relevant to you anyway. And you also have the option, to change the name if you want, add a little description, or even just added the color, the paint, for your pinpoint, add a little icon for your pinpoint as well. But those are completely optional. So once you have that, you also want to close the search results. So it's a little bit cleaner on your map. It's easier for you to see where your pinpoint is. Let's see. So next, so again, you can also rename your layer name. Right now it says untitled layer, but you can also click on that and just rename it to something more relevant to your project. So, for example, if you just put in like TCC sample, something like that, and click on save or hit enter, and you have a layer for your planning area now as well. So next, we want to, adding more context to help you determine your planning area eligibility, and also just help you enrich your narrative, and just help the reviewers better situate where your location is. So this goes back to the Dropbox folder Riley shared earlier, and that Dropbox contains three KMZ files. And the first thing you want to do is to download those files into your computer and just save to a folder that's convenient to you. And you want to add all three of those layers to your Google My Maps, so you have context on the incorporated studies, on tribal areas, and also on unincorporated areas around your planning area. And the way to do that is to add different layers. And to do that, you can go over here, click on add layer.
Nan, can we pause for just one moment?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to note a couple of things. First of all, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. And if you'd rather ask a question verbally, you can go ahead and come off mute right now, because we do want to make sure that this is, as clear as it can be for you all. So any questions at the moment? Hearing none, that's a very good sign. I did want to just also provide a bit of context on what these KMZ files are, what they are, and what they do. So a KMZ file is a geographic file. It shows spaces and boundaries in some cases, or just points on the map that you can use in Google My Maps, as well as other mapping software. Google Earth is another example of software that works pretty similarly to Google My Maps, since it's all Google. But then other software like Esri, ESRI's, ArcMap, ArcGIS programs can also read KMZ files. So they're pretty useful for going between different mapping tools and mapping software. And the other point I wanted to make is that one of the reasons that we provided these KMZ files for you is that they will show, and this is what Nan will show in just a moment, they will show where there are, it'll give you some idea. We aren't able to provide the exact boundaries at the moment, but it'll give you some idea of just where there are cities as well as unincorporated communities in and around your planning area, because ultimately that will determine who needs to complete some of the letters of support that Kayla mentioned, as well as who may need to be just on the application team in general, thinking about some of the requirements that Kayla talked about in terms of eligible applicants, public agency applicants, and so on. So I just wanted to provide that context. And the last thing I'll mention is I linked to the Dropbox folder earlier that includes these files. I'm going to post that link just one more time. And then I will include a link to Google Drive where we have those same KMZ files. Just in case your city or organization cannot access Dropbox, but can access Google Drive, there are two options there. And then finally, I see a couple of additional questions that just came in the chat. Would the city or county not have access to the maps? So if you are unable to access Google Drive or access Google accounts through your city or county, that may be one of the reasons that Google My Maps is not a great fit for you. But if you are able to access Google My Maps, you can actually share these files with any of your partners. And in worst case scenario, you can even take a screenshot of these just to give your colleagues some idea. But if you do work with a city that is not equipped to use Dropbox or Google Drive, in that case, you may need to ultimately use other mapping software such as ArcGIS to complete the maps. And then I do see one other question that is about the application requirements in general. And we can answer that in the chat separately. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Nan.
Thanks, Riley. All right, so let's keep adding on those KMZ files. So as I mentioned, the way to do that is to click on Add Layer over here. Once you do that, it's gonna this new title layer will pop up, and you want to click on Import. And there are a few ways to do that. And you just want to go back to the folder where you save those KMZ files and add those layers one by one. So you need to repeat this process 3 times just to add all 3 of them to your maps. So I'll add the first one now. And it might take a couple of seconds. Oops. Apologies, not sure why Google Maps is not cooperating with me today, but let me try this again.
Yeah, Nan, today mine is taking 2 upload attempts for it to generate the layer.
Gotcha, that's good to know. Yeah, I'm not sure if Google Maps is just acting up right now.
Yeah, I think Nan, if you wanna send it over to me, make me the host, I can kind of pick up where you've left off here. Because it seems like it's working on my end. I'm not sure if sometimes there's sometimes if the file name is too long or even the path is too long, like if you have a folder that has a really, really long folder name, you might notice that the file takes longer to upload. So looking at my screen, this should look very similar to what Nan was showing previously. And we'll just to get situated here. Again, if we go to add layer, that's where you can actually add an additional layer. And sometimes it also, when there's a, when you're screen sharing, things can slow down a little bit as well. But what you'll want to do is go to import here. And you may notice KML as one of the options. KMZ is a type of KML file. So if you see KML, don't be alarmed that KMZ should work anywhere a KML works. So we're going to want to select the file from your device. And I have this folder open here. So the KMZ for my maps Dropbox folder that I linked to. If we click that button, incorporated cities, we'll have to upload these one at a time. But if we click open, looks like it is loading, and there we go. So we finally have it open. So these orange dots here, these represent the center of all of the incorporated cities in California. So if you are with the city government, one of your cities is in this massive slew of orange dots. And again, the reason that we want to look at this is so that you can get a better idea of the context of the planning area and some of the potential partnerships you may want or may even need to form in order to apply to TCC. So to continue, there were those 2 other KMZ files. So we're going to go ahead and import each of those as well. And those include tribal areas, and these are actually not points, but they're actually the boundaries, which is important because if you are covering any of these boundaries, you'll want to make sure that you partner with the tribal government that has jurisdiction over those areas, as well as any of the sort of surrounding areas where they may have some level of influence, level of connection to those communities. And then last but not least are the unincorporated areas. And they're listed here actually as census designated places. So these will show up as pink dots. There are a lot of them because these are essentially areas that are not part of cities, but have some population and have some sort of definition of a community. And that's why they're CDPs, which stands for a census designated place. So what we'll do here is zoom back into the Chicken Ranch Rancheria that we were looking at. Want to note really quickly that the zeros here have no meaning. Those just mean that these are basically just shapes. They don't have any really data associated with them beyond the spatial data. And what we'll do next is sort of get an idea of what it might look like to actually start drawing a project area, or in this case, a planning area for the planning grant. So we're going to test out drawing new features. And so what we'll want to do is return to our example layer. And at this point, we will click we'll want to look at these icons here. So we have kind of an undo, redo, just like in Microsoft Word or most other computer programs. There's a select item or button, and this is just a hand tool. So that allows you to move around, allows you to click on different components here. And then there's some other interesting buttons here. So we have something called add marker, draw a line, add directions, and measure distances and areas. So we're not going to really worry about adding directions here. No one's planning a kind of way to navigate through your project area, at least not yet. But what we will want to practice is adding a marker. So we've added markers already by searching for a destination that's already on Google Maps. We've added markers by importing KMZ files. Now what we're going to do, and again, returning to making sure we're on that layer with the with that sort of home location, we're just going to add a new marker. And so we can add a marker anywhere. We want to just click this button. It creates this sort of plus symbol. and we can just click once. It just creates a random point. We can click save to keep it there. It will tell you the coordinates. It will allow you to do the same things that Dan showed earlier about changing the style, and you can also delete it. So we're going to go ahead and click that trash can icon to delete the point. And we're going to do the same thing with the line feature. So with the line feature, there are options to add a driving route, biking route, walking route. We're just going to add a line that's not necessarily tied to any infrastructure yet. Again, we can just add a line kind of anywhere in the area. So we'll start by clicking once, and then instead of creating the point, you'll be able to basically click the other end of the line, and you can move your cursor around to choose anywhere. Might as well, it will sort of snap onto the other point. So we can choose maybe this pink point here, you can click there, and then you can actually continue the line if you'd like. So if we want to go to another point, we could kind of expand this line. If not, we can go back to the point we were on and double click, and then it creates a line. And so what we will do here is, again, save it. It shows you the length, which will become important soon. And then has other style features and so on, and has the trash can button. So again, as a test, we will delete it and then move on to one last demonstration, which turns out to be kind of the most important one. We're going to zoom in a little bit here, and we're going to draw a polygon. So when it says add line or shape, the way you can add a shape, you might have already guessed, is to connect dots around until you create a full shape. So if once you loop back around to the original point that you started at, double click, you've created a polygon. And you can save that shape, and it will actually not only show you the perimeter, which is this kind of darker outline, but this shaded little box will show you the area in square mileage. And so again, just deleting this shape, we will move on to actually drawing your planning area. So now we're on page 7 of the guide, if you happen to have that open. And so now that you're familiar kind of with the basic functions of Google My Maps, you can actually draw a polygon around some of the neighborhoods or some of the resident homes that you'd like to serve with a TCC grant. And so for this example, what we're going to do is kind of the most ambitious partnership possible, which is one that involves a city government, an unincorporated community, and a tribal community. So if you are in an area that has all three, which there are several in California, but this was one of those examples, you may want to show your show off your ability to collaborate by partnering with a city government like Sonora, City of Sonora, a county government, in this case, and I'm totally blanking on which county. Oh, it's right here, Tuolumne County. So the unincorporated community of Jamestown, because they're not incorporated, they are within the county's jurisdiction, which means that if you want to apply for a TCC grant focused on the community of Jamestown, you actually need to partner with, or likely would want to partner with, the county government. For if anyone's interested in an implementation grant, if you want to actually build anything, you would need the county's participation if you want to put bike lanes along one of these streets, for example. But in most cases, you'd want to partner, again, if we want to kind of connect all these communities into one, exciting cross-jurisdictional partnership, we would need the city of Sonora, the county of Tuolumne, and then the Chicken Ranch Rancheria tribal government. And so what we'll practice here is drawing a boundary that encompasses all of those communities. And doesn't have to be a triangle, by the way. It can be any shape that you like. And the folks who live here, I don't know if anyone in these communities is on the call, feel free to come off mute and jump in. But we're just going to draw a really, really rough example of what it might look like to pull together a planning area that encompasses all three of these communities. And so again, it can be any shape. You can do a zigzag if you want, but as long as you go back to that original point and double click, left click, if you're using PC, we can create that project area. And at this point, we can rename this project area sample, for example, or in this case, we want to call it a planning area. Click save, and you'll see the square mileage here. 15.8 square miles. That does tend to be a little larger than a lot of planning areas, but there is no maximum area for a planning grant. So that's totally fine. And then the last thing that we'll do, just as an example, we're going to return to that point feature. And something that you may want to do once you've kind of identified your planning area, or even before you've done that drawing of the area, is just to add a marker pointing out where you're going to host some of your planning activities. For some planning activities, it makes sense to actually identify where you are going to conduct those activities. Let's say you want to do a design workshop for, I mentioned bike lanes before. Let's say you want to, draw some bike lanes or draw some, new ways of accessing the natural resources in the area. You might want to, have a workshop or a big community meeting in a public park. So there's this park right here. We can create a point. We can rename this community meeting location. And then that is another one of those letters of support, which is if you don't have ownership over this area, you would need to demonstrate site control if it is, for example, a private residence, or if it's a school gymnasium, you would need the school district's approval to use that facility to host a meeting, for example. But this is just some of the way, these are some of the ways that you can use Google My Maps to start this planning process. And so with that, I will pause. Does anyone have any questions?
Riley, not a question, but I'm sorry if I missed this, if you covered this, but it looks like also when I just try to draw like a boundary over the Chicken Ranch tribal territory there, it looks like it also, the polygon feature snapped to that boundary, which was super helpful if someone's just looking at the boundary that covers the KMZ file polygon that you uploaded.
Thank you. That's a really good point. So, and just to kind of demonstrate what Kayla is talking about, we can kind of redraw. Let's say we want to do a smaller area that's doesn't include the city of Sonora, and we want to make sure that it sticks really closely to the tribal territory. Like Kayla said, it will actually snap, it will kind of guide you toward the boundaries of the polygon here. And one limitation of my maps is that you can't upload boundaries for all the cities or all the county territories at the same time. Otherwise, we could do the same thing with the Jamestown area or with the Sonora boundary, Sonora boundary, but that is another option. So you can kind of create a boundary like this that includes the entirety of a tribal territory plus some of the other areas around it, for example.
I think if people were interested in project area that included like a couple of different, like if they wanted to include a couple of different specific project area boundaries, they might be able to get the KMZ files from like maybe the cities or different sources too, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And if you are applying with the city government, you're not teaming up with any incorporated community or tribal territory. You can ask SGC for advice on this. They might be able to help clarify, help point you in the right direction. But if you are with a tribal government or with an unincorporated community or a county government, we'll be able to help you through that process, and we'll be able to help you develop your map on here, your kind of starting map, and then we'll be able to take this and turn it into a more kind of formal map that can sort of help carry your application along. Any other questions on the map itself? I see a question regarding the CDP partnership process. Just wondering if there's any other question on the map itself before we close this. Hearing none, we can stop sharing the screen. We will go back to the slideshow in a moment. I think we can transfer that back over to Nan, if you're ready. Also, perfect, thank you. And see a couple of other questions here. So I'll answer these two questions before we move on to the next portion. So if the CDP is in the planning area, is there anything you would want to see in the proposal regarding the CDP? If we have partners that service or are based in the area, is that sufficient? So I think I would say, first of all, there is a governmental entity to partner with in those areas, and that entity is the county. So whatever county that CDP is within, I would first recommend partnering with them. It's true that for the planning grant, you don't necessarily need their approval on everything, because you're not necessarily changing any infrastructure in the area. But what you are doing is, engaging those residents and potentially using some of the location. You might want to use some of those locations for things like community meetings. So I would recommend reaching out to the county, and usually they'll have, depending on the size of the county, they'll usually have some, kind of local field office or particular portion that is relevant there. And then it's also worth noting that at the very least, they would need to submit a letter demonstrating consistency between your application and your application for the planning grant, as well as their local policies and plans. So there's a requirement for a consistency letter from the planning and the public works departments. And then to your second question about other geographic files, KML you can absolutely import. GeoJSON I'm not as familiar with, I'm not sure about. I think that may be possible, but I'm not as familiar with that file type specifically. I will say that shape files are not able to be put into Google. So that is one area where you would need to use mapping software, which is something that the TA team can provide to unincorporated and tribal applicants. And so with that, we are going to shift back to just a few more slides about the technical assistance process. So I'll pass it over to Anna.
Thank you, Riley and Ann, for that presentation and going over the mapping tool. So here's another quick slide again. I know Kayla went over the TCC round 5 timeline, but we're just going to do another quick overview in case any of you missed some of these important key dates. So just to reiterate, through February and March of 2023, we do have a direct pre-application technical assistance onboarding. And again, at this time, we're only offering this for tribal and unincorporated communities. We do have an intake survey to begin that process, which I'll go over in a few slides, and I'll also provide the link in case any of you have not signed up yet, so you can sign up and we can get that started. Again, we expect the final guidelines to be adopted by SGC in the next month, followed with the application and notice funding availability in the following month. And we expect to begin the planning grant actual application process from April, and with the application deadline being somewhere over the summer in between July and August. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more in depth about some of the technical assistance. So technical assistance is a core function of the TCC program, and technical assistance is provided throughout the application phase of the program to eligible planning applicants only. So for planning applicants, technical assistance provided at this time will only be supporting applicants that come or incorporate tribal communities and or rural and disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Unfortunately, technical assistance is not currently available for other TCC planning applicants. The SGC staff will be available throughout the whole application phase to answer any questions or review any other comments or concerns that you may have that come up during the application phase, throughout the application phase. For any other planning applicants that do not fall within the tribal or rural category. So this technical assistance is provided to support TCC applicants in the development of their TCC application. And an overview of the services that we provide are provided here on this slide. So some services include helping you develop and identify the planning area. Part of the reason why we also did the mapping tutorial to kind of give you a head start. Also doing project alignment with the different planning activities if you have any questions. We also review the guidelines, and we understand that throughout the application phase, questions may come up regarding eligibility requirements, or you may want us to review some of your application materials. That is something that the technical assistance team can provide, as well as a review of the transformative elements, ensuring that those are being incorporated into the application, budget development, and partnerships engagement. Again, technical assistance varies depending on the applicant, so there's not a one-way streamline of the services that each applicant receives. It is very dependent on what each applicant needs. And we are there to work with each applicant to identify those needs and make sure that we are en route to submitting a successful and full TCC application. So next slide. So as I briefly mentioned, and I believe Riley put the survey in the chat, right now we are hosting a pre-application technical assistance provider assistance through February and most likely through March while the final guidelines are being released. Again, this is something for you to indicate your interest, and also open to tribal and rural unincorporated communities to kind of discuss, whether you're having questions about what application type is right for you, or maybe you want to go over some of the application components. We're hosting 30-minute one-on-one consultations to kind of get that kickstart before the application officially opens. If you fill out the intake survey, our team will be circle back with you within a few days to get that meeting scheduled. Additionally, if you have any questions, we do have some contact information here listed on this slide. So for rural and DUC and tribal planning applicants, you can reach out to Riley or myself, and our emails are listed on the slide. For any other planning applicants, you may reach out to SGC TCC staff at tcc@sgc.ca.gov, and they're able to assist you. Again, if you're unsure if your planning area or your partners include tribal or rural communities, feel free to reach out to us and we can assist with that as well. And then again, I'll go ahead and show the link to the intake survey. So the link is on the chat as well. So that's open and available. So you can go ahead and fill that out now. And with that, I think our next step is to kind of do some breakout rooms. So we go to the next slide, we'll have 3 breakout rooms based on the applicant type. Feel free to jump between breakout rooms and we'll be there to kind of dive, if you have any questions more specific to any of these application types regarding questions about the application components, timeline, and or maybe of the mapping tools that you saw today.